threshold, the dawning of a new day, brothers and sisters. The earth is flat, floating through the endless oceans of the universe.
As a kid, I would always draw comic books. That was probably my first sort of love of drawing and visual art. And I think that continued through for years and years. I think in this show as well, I think a lot of those comic and early sort of influences have really come through, and I'm sort of celebrating a lot of those kind of early, almost nostalgic kind of references for my artwork. I was into pretty much the standard sort of superhero sort of comics, a lot of Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, all those kind of pretty fantasy and otherworldly sort of characters. And it's kind of funny, a lot of those things, although maybe like a lot of that figurative stuff is now sort of in the work, a lot of those themes of good and evil and secret identities, costumes and doppelgangers, I think a lot of those kind of themes have now actually sort of entered the work. A lot of costumes and masks, looking at identity and dualisms, I guess, within our own personalities, things like that. So it's funny the way those little things that you have when you're a kid sort of end up sort of coming back and you revisit them maybe when you're a bit older and sort of from a different perspective, I think, as well. Yeah. The title's kind of a whimsical title. Quinn Mallory is the lead character from Sliders, which was a 90s TV show. It was a TV show I guess I watched, when I was kind of growing up as a teenager. I always liked those kind of fantasy sort of shows. I mean, the show's about a group of of people that sort of explore different dimensions. They're trying to get back to the original Earth, and they sort of go on adventures every week as they sort of travel through different dimensions. I wanted to reference that show just because I thought that this exhibition had a whole bunch of those sort of different worlds that were sort of colliding, and I actually wanted to explore different subjects and different manners within each different paintings. And in some ways I sort of felt like each painting I was kind of entering a different world and almost a different logic that sort of operates within sort of each painting, like whether it be the palette or the subject matter of each. So it became this kind of tongue-in-cheek but sort of a poetic way to sort of talk about sort of sliding between manners and ideas and aesthetics and handling of the paint and that sort of thing. So it was, in some ways it was sort of whimsical, but it was also a little bit of a throwback to influences and things that I'd seen as a kid, and that sort of sci-fi, fantasy, sort of like the comic book thing as well. There was a little bit of nostalgia. I don't like too much nostalgia. I feel like that can kind of keep you in the past, and I do like to kind of keep moving forward. But it felt right for this show to kind of enter it in that way. Yeah. When I went straight from high school into art school, always painted. I dabbled in, maybe a little bit of sculpture, a little bit of printmaking, but it was always the paint that sort of really sort of got me. I moved around a bunch of studios after art school, went back, did my master's, and now I teach at the university where I studied, which is cool. So I've sort of come sort of full circle. But I've sort of I've tried to just maintain a really sort of steady practice for probably 15 years or so now. Once again, like trying to always move and push the work sort of in new directions. But it's just I feel like I've just never really sort of ceased finding new things within painting for me to explore. Like sometimes I think about using other mediums, but then a lot of my ideas are now sort of wrapped up in painting and the way I paint and the subject matter that I sort of choose. So no, painting is very much, often they're paintings that can be almost about painting, as much as I might be talking about something else, there's always, on some level, I'm talking about the paint on the surface as well, and what it means to kind of to make a painting, I think. One is silver, one is gold. It's after Goya. It's the original Goya's The Witch's Sabbath, and it's I love it. I love the fantasy worlds that Goya sort of creates. He had a lot of whimsy in his work, also a lot of darkness. I think he saw. I really love the way that he seemed to see humanity, where he didn't really view things as in terms of good and evil. He sort of saw that there's the whole sort of multitude of whole spectrum of what it means to be sort of human, and he really sort of explored all those dark themes of what it means to be human, as well as the sort of light sort of themes. I really wanted to reflect on those influences sort of with this show. There's a lot of references in this show from my past, like comics and Goya. So that one was a real piece where I was just paying real homage to kind of, the real things that I guess I really love. I've made a few little alterations kind of to it to kind of, added in a couple of little subtle sort of things. But that one was a direct sort of reference of just looking at where I've sort of come from and the sort of work that I really wanted to steer my own sort of work in. So sort of paying homage, but I also wanted to just really see about the way he constructs space in painting, and it was a lot about me learning how to paint that sort of painting. He's got these like grand sort of supernatural sort of themes, a lot of sort of pagan sort of themes, and I really like exploring those kind of ideas. I guess religion, which would have been such a predominant theme in that sort of era of painting, he's got a really interesting sort of take on that. Whereas like French and Italian sort of classicism was very lofty and cloudy and very sort of light. I felt like a lot of the Spanish painters have a lot of darkness within their classicism. It's like it's real, from the guts, like real dirt under the fingernails. And he doesn't shy away from those kind of those themes that some of the more sort of lofty sort of classical sort of religious kind of work sort of deals with. So I think there's an earthliness sort of to that, but then he brings in an amazing sense of fantasy to the work as well, and that's just for me just such a great piece. It's just got the devil sort of goat sort of in there, sort of in front of the procession of women with their children and stuff, and it's just a hauntingly evocative sort of piece. And I really wanted to really wanted to sort of dive into it and really stare at that painting for a long time. And yeah, it was actually quite a challenge to do that painting. It took quite a long time to really get my head around it. But then that was the most rewarding thing to do. So yeah, real homage kind of piece. Yeah. I've got nothing. It comes from an internet meme from maybe about 10 years ago. So that was from an internet picture I got from the internet. I wanted to use pictures that I'd found online and things like that, as well as art historical references, I guess, for this show, so I could really collide those different worlds. So for me, that piece sort of represents the antithesis of say the Goya piece, where you're looking at hundreds of years ago, and then this is a very sort of contemporary sort of image. Once again, it's about me just sort of referencing the things that I'm looking at every day, being online, digital sort of things. But it's also got a strange sort of surrealism to it, the way, obviously the birds kind of morphing. It's got a great sort of whimsy, a great sort of humour sort of to it. I guess it's sort of breaking out of reality and sort of, entering sort of this sort of fantasy sort of land, almost like a dreamlike sort of quality. So it touches on some of those things that maybe Goya would have sort of touched on as well, but just sort of coming at it from a, real 21st century source and that sort of thing. So once again, getting those kind of older references, newer references to really sort of collide was something that I really wanted to do with the show. So that one's probably more of a real homage to things contemporary things that I'm sort of looking at. Yeah, well, Norwegian Wood, once again, another piece that took long time for me to complete. It was a real sort of challenge to get my head around making that sort of painting. It came from the cover of an old book, like an old diving book, I think about the Great Barrier Reef, but I wanted to take it away from that sort of direct reference of just like a natural world. And for me, it represents entering another world, maybe another world that we can't inhabit all the time, but we can sort of visit. The mask that the figure wears in it is one of the main things I really want to focus on. It's very central in the piece, and I'm sort of interested in this idea of sometimes maybe if we enter other worlds or other spaces, we have to wear masks, or it's other sides of ourselves that can enter these other places, maybe other places we're not supposed to be. But once again, like with the whole show, it's each piece represents another little pocket of another little world we can sort of enter. So Norwegian Wood, obviously it sort of references the Beatles song. There's not really necessarily much in it in a way that comes from the Beatles song, but there's a sense of nostalgia, I think, that hopefully the title conjures up, and I think the piece has almost a sepia tone, sort of distant, sort of like a memory sort of quality sort of to it. So I feel like maybe even the way that we sort of fantasize in our own heads and we sort of enter like a daydreamy sort of world is another space that we sort of inhabit sort of within us, you know, day to day. So I was sort of trying to capture that sort of dreamy sort of quality, but also at the same time the natural world and that sort of that undersea world that obviously exists out there. It's something that we can't access all the time. It's just something that's almost sort of hidden from us under the ocean, and we can visit it for very short periods of time, and then we have to sort of come back to our own reality and leave it there. So that's in some ways about entering another space just for a short time before you have to return to normalcy, I guess. Yeah. Sliding Worlds number 9 is one of the works on paper in the show. I've done a series of works on paper to complement all the canvas works, and this work is actually going to be a limited edition print as well, available for the exhibition. I love doing works on paper. I feel quite free doing works on paper. There's something that's not as precious about them, so I feel you can be very sort of inventive, or more inventive with paint use, and I think that work in some ways represents a certain sort of opening of the mind, like as the face kind of starts dissolving towards the top of the page. I think there's I like how the face sort of dissolves just into paint. So it's kind of the idea of maybe sort of form, then sort of returning back to paint. I think it's got a strange sort of mood to it as well, and all the eyeballs kind of give it almost like a godlike sort of figure. I feel like all the works on paper sort of in the show, they're once again little snapshots into other worlds and different sort of subjects, and that's hence the title, The Sliding Worlds, referencing the Sliders TV show. But yeah, each one just been a little experiment of form and paint. But the works on paper, they're definitely a chance to be more free with the subject matter and just sort of let things kind of go and really evolve. I always want my work to be evolving and moving forward. I really don't like it to ever stagnate and anything like that. So hopefully from this body of work I'll bounce forward and onto new subject matter. Usually there'll be one or two works that end up pointing the direction that I want to sort of go in, and I really try to maintain an organic process like that, where I I don't try to overthink it or preempt ideas. A lot of the ideas happen while I'm painting anyway, and a lot of the subjects definitely sort of come out while I'm painting. So without wanting to preempt it too much, I think there's always going to be that figurative element within my work, because that's just something that I think I really connect with. I think that's something very human, and I always want the work to have that sort of human quality. I think that's something that communicates well and can connect sort of people. But as long as there's an organic sort of process and things naturally move from this body of work to the next body of work, I'll be sort of happy with that. Yeah.